but first to delight customers. And this is not simply to buy somebody a cup of coffee or to get to know him or her and their families, but to really have a deep knowledge of what makes his or her company tick, what's important, and how you can help those companies. Now, I can spend days on this topic discussing what we're able to do with companies like Verizon, Walmart, Home Depot, Carrefour, companies large and small, the way either Nortel, Motorola, or General Electric were able to become very instrumental in the success of those companies. Second, critically important to guarantee that we provide an environment where people can feel they're motivated, there's a sense of a meritocracy, people they have to produce the results and the values, and they'll be able to fulfill their career ambitions. Third, and of course very important in business, to deliver superior financial results. But you're really going to be able to get people excited to say, look, I don't have the most revenues, I don't have the most profits. And my perspective always was, if you do a great job in number one and number two, three should be a natural outcome. If you delight your customers, if they're going to support you, and if you're helping them be successful, if you have an organization that provides leadership development, provides opportunities for people that are career-oriented, the three should be a natural outcome of the first two. Fourth, even back in 1986, I thought it was very important to be involved in not-for-profit activities, to give or to mentor those that may not have been as privileged or as fortunate as we have been. And this has worked really well for me. I mean, people want to work for companies that have a good social conscience. Fifth one, and this is hard for some people to accept, but I thought it was important for them to know that we work very hard. We work to be absolutely the best, and the expectations are they're going to be successful, to quote-unquote, to win. And so, look, that may be uncomfortable for some people, and they may be more comfortable elsewhere, but hopefully they'll use the experience in those cases to further their careers. And the last one would, I'd say last and certainly most important, for the leadership team, starting with a person that's at the top of the organizational chart, to really model the purported leadership values within the organization, and who gets rewarded, promoted, what types of people we hire. So I do believe that that values play a very important part of creating the right culture for the company. In General Electric, as an example, we use the famous 4 E's. So every time we interviewed people, there'd be a mental assessment. Does he or she have the energy to drive the job with passion? Can he or she energize people, employees, customers, suppliers? Does he or she have the edge? Can you make the hard decision when necessary, or are you forever going to look for reasons to defer, to hope that good things are going to happen? And do you have a track record of success? We made small revisions when I went to Motorola. We thought being a technology company is very important to envision the future. 2, 3, and 4 stayed the same. We also added a comment of always with ethics. We thought companies that certainly are above and beyond approach where any ethical violation will not be tolerated, and this provided really a wonderful opportunity to communicate what the company stood for. And the third and last page, I said this is one I had added in what I was hoping to see generally within my organization. First one is an organization full of passionate people, and to use the word forceful optimism. And this is one of my appraisals that I believe Jack Welch put in on my performance appraisal. And initially said, well, Jack, is this good or not? And but the whole concept of thinking what's possible, not just to naively hope that those things are going to happen, but what are you doing personally, what are you doing with your team, what are you doing to improve the skills to actually achieve those very noble, those very ambitious achievements. And the other one is to look at really people, they're so-called blue-collar executives, people that serve by example, they're servant leaders, if you will. They have a terrific work ethic to never expect your people to work any harder than you do. And very important not to get caught up in the trappings, which many people do in high levels in the organization. No pomposity, no bureaucracy, no complexity. And I guess this did appeal to the organization. If you can really behave in a way that's consistent with what you say, as I said before, you will not be walking alone. Let me change course very quickly on leadership and mobilization. Last Monday and Tuesday, we were in New York, and within Blackstone, there are 72 separate companies within Blackstone. And we have spent a couple of days discussing the latest trends in the industry globally, but also latest trends in leadership and the so-called mobilization. As indicated before, coming up with a strategy is in fact very hard. But mobilizing the organization to help you execute the strategy, starting with the front lines, the customer service people, the sales people, that is even more challenging. And so we spent multiple hours, including a breakout session, but I would take just one page to discuss the messages that we were delivered. You saw Candy Ogg as the person that was communicating. He's a top human resource and operating partner within Blackstone, again, with a mission of improving leadership development in the private equity world. So again, I can spend hours and days on this page, but I'm simply going to give you a snippet of what I think is very important if you as a functional business leader, if you're going to be driving a massive change within the organization. Number one, you have to announce it. You have to be bold, so every employee, whether you have 10 people or 100,000 people. But then the 5 steps is to put really big people in the most important jobs. And if you have 10 people organization, there may be one person that gets assigned. It's a large organization, but people are going to watch your behavior and whom you put in the big tasks. So how serious you are about accomplishing the big objectives which you've outlined. Second, to create a compass for the company, for people to know the non-negotiables, are there any sacred cows, and what are the expectations on the softer side. Then to be addressing the harder issues, the organizational structure, the processes, and if necessary, the financial means to help you drive the changes. And I would argue most important to deploy what we refer to now at Blackstone as fast teams. Teams they're thinking big, they're moving very, very fast, but to understand that big successes coming from achieving lots of small wins. And that's how you accumulate into a very significant win. And to build early momentum, whether that's revenues, customer satisfaction, or cost, is critically important to give the organization and people the confidence of what's going to be coming. So anyway, I've covered the career reflections, the leadership objectives, the 3 pages, page here that hopefully stimulates your thoughts of how do you drive strategy into a mobilization implementation of the organization. In the last pages, some good practices, learnings, and suggestions from, again, spending 30 years in the corner office. Top of the list is that real leadership is a privilege. I've always felt that way, but also to be enjoyed. Yes, it's sometimes lonely to be in the corner office, but I would argue the opportunities of controlling your own destiny, to setting the agenda, to spend time with people that are upwardly mobile is as meaningful and as exciting as anything which I have done. So it takes a while to earn the leadership post. I would argue it is a privilege, one that over time you do get to enjoy, especially looking at the results of your efforts. Second, don't try to reinvent the wheel on everything. There's so many great authors of books out there. Don't read all of them by any means, but for you to read some of them and to apply. Whether it's Peter Drucker, Jack Welch, Jim Collins, Michael Porter, Christensen, Harry Kramer from Kellogg. But also it's very important then to apply those in your job. I mean, you cannot play golf, but you're not going to learn to be a great swimmer by reading books, by getting some instructions and some reflections from a great minds, and for you to apply those goes a long way toward short-circuiting the road to success. Next one I firmly believe in, again, it's nothing revolutionary, but in a food for thought. Most of the time, I would suggest that you know exactly what needs to be done in business. I mean, I'll use the example of everyday life. If we want to lose weight, if we want to be healthy, we know what we need to do. I mean, we need to eat healthier food and theoretically exercise more. Now, it's difficult to do. You have to get motivated. Sometimes you have contests with your friends. You change your buying habits, what you buy in the store. But the comment is most of the time we know what has to happen. It's to keep searching and learning about ourselves. How do we do the things that we know need to be done? I would argue for a vast majority of the activities in business. As you get more experiences, you know what needs to be done. What as an individual contributor or as a team, are you working on the process to ensure what you know has to be done? Are you doing it in a way that is done as quickly as humanly possible? Don't read too much into your own clippings, especially if things are going well. I mean, there's a tendency for egos to get way out of proportion. General Electric used to use the terminology, even turkeys can fly with a tailwind. So being humble when you're successful, to keep learning how to keep making things better is going to serve you very well. And remember, you'll probably never be as good when things are going exceptionally well, or conversely, you're never going to be as quote unquote bad as when you may have a career hiccup, if you will. Which brings us to the next point. There's no substitute for experience. These are tough jobs, taking in different functions, and you can learn from both. You learn from both your successes and from your failures. And how quickly you get up after a career issue or defeat, if you will. How quickly you get up, how quickly you apply what you've learned, and you move on with your life and your career. Two questions I ask my mentees to reflect on. First one, what are you doing when no one is watching? If it's 5, 6 o'clock in the office, maybe it's midnight as you're working on paper, you're working on a speech, you're working on a project, and that's going to tell you. Are you truly motivated? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Or are you going through the motions because you're doing something which you think people are expecting you to do? And maybe a provocative question, are you the manager that you want your boss to be? And it's a human nature. It's always easier to reflect on what other people are now doing versus are you doing all the things that you can to be the best you can be. And as you see in the last one, if you give it your all, you feel much better about yourself, and most important, you're going to sleep well at night, and you have very few regrets. And questions will be coming, but this is let me just reflect on my favorite quote. So we have tried to apply throughout my life, but this is in a church, and I read it. I have this little quote in my office, on my desk. I have it in my office back at home. I have it in the bathroom mirror. So before I go to bed, before I go to the office. This is a quote from a 12-year-old boy that unfortunately passed away from AIDS in 2001. His name was Makosi Johnson. In his comment, he gave a speech at Durban. It was 4 sections. Do all you can with what you have and the time you have and the place you are. I've reflected on it now for almost 10 years. I think it's a very personally meaningful quote. And same as my leadership principles before. This is not meant to be a suggestion that you should be adopting this quote as your modus operandi, but to simply have you think and reflect. What principles are important to you? Are you applying those on a regular basis? Are there 2 or 3 quotes that you think be good reminders of you, as we get sidetracked as always do on an ongoing basis, to bring you back to again, what you thought was important to you in the times of reflection, driving a life that you think is important to you, and that there's no better judge of your efforts, of your accomplishments than yourself. So great to be part of this first webinar. Adriana will be typing the messages and bringing them here. And let's see, the first one is that what are the top 3 actions that you would consider motivating employees in a startup? This is from Georgie Kosev. Georgie, a great question. And frankly, I have not had startups as small companies. I have had a number of startups within large companies. Within large companies, the most important thing was to provide even a different facility, different reward system, different reviews, because quite often large organizations can overwhelm a small startup. So try to have the organization feel different, be different, manage different. I thought was very, very important. In terms of a personal startup, I have not had those yet. But in the spirit of continuous learning, continuous improvement, I certainly plan on having some. What I do is myself or one of my 3 boys. And hopefully if we do a webinar 2-3 years from now, I can give you some practical examples what I have done in a startup, which within the Zafirovsky family. This is from Victor Kunovsky. The question is, how do values and culture influence strategy implementation? Victor, this is a great question. And every company talks about values, every company talks about culture. It's very rarely you see those coming together. Let me just give you one example of how employees can provide feedback to management. And I'll come back to the specific question. But for example, General Electric, Welch used to do an annual survey, a statistical survey of probably 30,000 employees, and asking very hard questions. Do you believe in management? Are the strategies of a General Electric company, a workout, empowerment, Six Sigma quality, are they being embraced by management and being driven with real purpose versus giving it a superficial effort? In places where we scored the worst, and again, this is a company that had a reputation of being so aggressive on dealing with non-performers. The place where employees were telling Jack Welch that the company was not walking the talk was dealing with non-performance. They really believed that we were too slow acting, demoting, firing people in positions of authority. Now again, if you remember, General Electric, the values were, do you have personal energy? Can you energize others? Do you have edge to make tough decisions on a timely basis, and can you execute? And the feedback being provided back to the chairman of the company was that only 50% of people believed that actually was the case. So part of the concept of innovation at Apple, Steve Jobs was the master. No one was confused. They were absolutely committed to innovation. American Express on customer service. For a while, Toyota on Kaizen, before they had problems, but they're coming back nicely right now. So I'm using high examples, if you will, of organization where when you think about them, the screen within the organization, the high level of expectations of employees from one another becomes so powerful, the culture in essence becomes the biggest tool for continued improvement, or conversely, if people do not believe in the culture, then it becomes one of the biggest impediments in driving the business. So, Victor, again, hopefully that answers your question. Victor, again, another question, and what is the role of the leader in managing the values and culture in organizations and in nations? I mean, great question. I think it's of paramount importance. Being a chairman of the board now of 3 companies, I'm also on the board of Boeing and Stericycle. The number one job of boards, the number one job of management teams is to put a leader in a business unit. If that person is not behaving well, and very rarely you can change values that people have. I mean, you need to move decisively. that person needs to be taken out. Or conversely, people that are doing a good job, you need to reward, you need to celebrate them. But there's no substitute for the company being very consistent. Number one, as I mentioned before, for the leader to exhibit the purported leadership values within the company. And I'll add another comment. The concept of performance appraisals, including soliciting 360 feedback, or doing roundtable, skip-level meetings. At all times, assessing management is absolutely the number one position of boards looking at CEO, or CEOs looking for people reporting to them. And the last comment, again, for 30 plus years, I've been a president and CEO of a business. Every time I would give a performance review to somebody else, I would ask them, tell me 3 or 4 things that I can do better to help the company, to help you and your team. In other words, what can we be doing differently? And virtually every year, and never less frequently than once every 2 years, I had an anonymous 360 survey. I would take those results, including the written comments. I would share those with every member of the team. The comment really was, this is a journey of continuous improvement. And if you put the company, if you truly put the company first, you need to be transparent of what the team can be doing better, and to pursue that with lots of rigor. 2 questions here. One is from Maria Gorgieva. What is the biggest trade-off you face in your path to success? Time with family initially. Again, we moved 9 times during my 25 years at General Electric. But the other trade-offs were, and I think I always prioritized making graduations, making soccer games, making piano recitals when the boys were young. But that's the one that certainly was a tough one to trade off. The rest of them, being obviously before the career when I was in college, I may have many, many hobbies. So the hobbies decrease if you're really involved in your career. The hobbies really were, was family, was work, not-profits that matter. National Union 2025 is those. Helping public schools in Chicago is another one. And staying healthy. So many of the other habits, many of the other hobbies had suffered as a result of it. But that's a trade-off which I was happy to make, and I would make that at any point in time. I would add another one, reading. I used to love to read novels. When I was a youngster and going through college, and I've changed so many jobs since every couple of years. I was being not-for-profit, so I read constantly, but typically it's on the jobs, on the not-for-profits, on current global affairs. And I may read 7, 8 books a year. Thomas Jefferson is the latest book I'm reading on, or I love to read biographies. But reading broadly, generally, or just novels for enjoyment is another thing which had suffered. And when I turn 90 plus, maybe we'll be doing more of that reading. A question for Jovan Senev. How do you choose the right candidates when hiring? Good historical performance and experience with possible loyalty, compromise, or novices who will follow? Boy, Jovan, a great question. If you're working for companies that truly value leadership and leadership development, there is an abundance of information on employees. So maybe it's unfair that you evaluate people's performance based on past results. A place like Procter & Gamble, IBM, I'm using large companies, General Electric, there's a continuous summary of people's performances, what their strengths have been, how they have changed over the years, their weaknesses, and how they have improved over the years, and also their leadership assessments, feedbacks from 360s. So companies that truly pursue and truly follow the the statement, the leadership is very important. I would argue this task is much easier. And I would always say, if you can hire somebody internally, it's always better than taking a chance from somebody externally. And that's one of the real benefits to work for companies that have a strong, documented sense of their values and sense of results expectations. And if those companies truly have a culture of meritocracy, I would say it's utopia. If you can work for that kind of a company, that kind of a government organization, that kind of a not-for-profit, you should jump at the opportunity immediately. If it's an outside person, it is much more challenging. You go to the interviews. I mean, by the way, when I used to hire people from the outside, I used to interview them 7 or 8 times. I mean, half an hour the first time, but toward the end, 2, 3, 4 hour dinners. It's very important for them to understand you and vice versa, and also to be calling references directly. You can have your HR organization to do the reference checks. You can have the recruiting agency, the headhunter, do those reference checks. But there's no substitute for you picking up the phone and calling the person's previous managers directly. And there's so many legal exposures, if you will, and people cannot necessarily be completely open and honest. But most of the time, if you invest the time to listen and to ask the hard questions, you'll get enough of a sense before the person is telling you about his or her accomplishments, why they have left that company, why they were not promoted to what maybe had appeared to be a logical next step. Those are the major elements. And I would argue is that you should be prepared to admit mistakes. I mean, historical performance does not guarantee the same performance in the future. All the best references, even if they're completely honest, would not guarantee future performance. So it's very important to always keep assessing. I made the comment, every meeting, every presentation is an assessment, is an interview. And I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean, you're always looking for the positives. You also want to provide positive reinforcements to the organizations. You also want to reward with promotions, with monetary rewards, with telling people what a wonderful job Joey or Susan may be doing. But if you make a mistake, you should not say, well, gee, I chose that person. It's going to be embarrassing now if we're going to have to ask that person to be demoted or to leave the company. So hiring people is very important. Providing continuous feedback is very important, but dealing with non-performance, it's also very important. Otherwise, you will be compromising the purported high-performance expectations for your organization. Well, I better be providing shorter answers. I think we have about 10 more minutes. Question for Boyan Naidov. What is a field that you see in Macedonia that is underdeveloped, where young people can make a great impact and grow Macedonia? I'm going to do my master's in finance now in Thunderbird, in Arizona. My GMAT is in the 96th percentile. My GPA is 4.0. I'm very ambitious and excel academically and socially. I want to leave Macedonia, experience as much as possible, and bring back all the experience to Macedonia. I mean, Boyan, first of all, congratulations. You're obviously much smarter than I ever was. My GPA was never 4.0. And I did not take GMAT, but certainly I don't think I would have scored in the 96th percentile. I mean, look, there's so many things to be accomplished. I mean, the not-for-profit world, solving hunger, solving issues of education, so massive efforts on that front. But in the business world and the healthcare, it's exploding demand on a global basis, energy, technology, software. I mean, all those areas have and continue to grow immensely. And arguably producing things is also becoming much more relevant on a global basis. It's no longer, by way of reflection, people thought Japan Inc. was going to dominate the world in everything electronics in the 1970s. We know, obviously, 30 years later, that no single country has the domain on most of the progress, if you will, in important fields. Likewise, China seemed to be the place where all manufacturing will be done, or India seemed to be the place where all the outsourcing will be done. But I would just say that the opportunities I had mentioned are very important, and they'll become even more important going forward. And with the advent of technology, the ability to perform your job from virtually any place in the world, including out of Macedonia, is very, very important, and it becomes much more realistic. And Bojan, again, I would love to see you come in our second summit. Last year was the first called Diaspora Summit, which changes the name for the summit this year from Economic Development. We'll be discussing leadership opportunities both globally and in Macedonia. It's going to be offered in October. Look at our website, and hopefully you'll get some more specific ideas during that time there. Last three questions. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to cover all three of them, but this is from Oliver Dakovsky. As you're moving up in the chain and taking on more challenging roles, how long would you typically spend in each role? I mean, Oliver, you can look at my LinkedIn site. I will welcome you as a participant. Simply I've listed the duration for each one of the jobs I've had. So you probably have average 2 or 3 years. But a little color there. I never asked for a job. And I never thought I was ready for the next job. I mean, typically in General Electric was that way. Or people try to recruit me out of GE. People just tap me on the shoulder and says, Mike, we'd love for you to take a bigger job. And I says, gee, I'm not finished yet. Give me 6, 12, 18 more months to finish it. So there's more of the process within General Electric where they're looking people, they're producing results. The authoritative values always get good scorecard on those, good feedback on values. And there is a very concentrated effort to take individuals in with values and results and to give them more opportunities to grow. So again, 2 to 3 years was not by design. And I do think that ideally you stay in your job a little bit longer to really to be able to go to the core, to the essence of that position. And the last one is that from Mihailovsky, Slajan, how do you maintain consistency in an inconsistent and permanently changing environment in Macedonia? I mean, I would, first of all, to say that the grass is not always greener on the other side. There are many parts of any country in the world, including the United States, that change, whether it's in politics, business priorities. What nobody can take away from you are your personal sets of expectations, standards. Are you doing the kinds of things that you're hoping the government or government officials or business people to do? So as I've always faced decisions, I always thought if you start with yourself, if you were the change you want, if you want the environment to be, and for you not to get brought down into level of behavior, which as you're indicating, you may not find tasteful. But I do think that that having the ability and the perseverance to grow personally, to have the confidence you can go virtually any place and make a positive impact is going to serve you well in any environment. So let me finish here to say, hopefully this webinar was useful to you. Every time I'm asked to speak, particularly with emerging leaders, I take that very seriously. I covered a number of very significant items, both in terms of a career thought, leadership principles that work for me, how I think about mobilization, and some of the learnings from my days in leadership. They're not meant to say they are right or they are right for everybody. But again, as I said, I'm really hoping they'll be thought-provoking. You can reflect deep within yourself, your current situation, and very important, where do you want to be in the future, and make some commitments to yourself, whether it's a quote or personal commitment, and find the time to reflect on it on an ongoing basis. So again, just being on this webinar does demonstrate that you're interested in learning and interested in self-improvement, and those two are very, very important elements and criteria for success. So thank you again for your time this morning. I wish you all the best, and I hope to see many of you in the upcoming months and years, whether in the United States or in the beautiful Republic of Macedonia.
Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to provide us with such an inspirational and motivating discussion and sharing your own personal experiences with us. I would also like to thank all of our participants as well for joining us today for Macedonia 2025's first webinar in career management and leadership development. As I have mentioned earlier, we will continue the conversation over our LinkedIn group page. Just search for Macedonia 2025 and you will find it. We will also have the video available for viewing after today's webinar. If you are interested in learning more about Macedonia 2025, just visit us on our website at macedonia2025.com. You will also, on our website, learn more about our membership tiers, which we are currently updating. If you have any questions whatsoever about membership, our activities, or any future webinars, please feel free to contact me at andriana@macedonia2025.com. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to hosting you again in the future soon.